Teal Hardiman, an activist, a community activist from Chicago. Chris Kennedy, a businessman from Kenilworth. J.B. Pritzker, a businessman from Chicago. Bob Diber, the superintendent of schools in downstate Madison County, who's from Marine, and Daniel Biss, a state senator from Evanston. Now, most of the questions will be answered by all of the candidates, but we're also going to be asking some individual questions to all six and then asking follow-up questions to all six as well. And then we'll be wrapping up things with a closing statement from each candidate. So those are the rules, essentially. And joining me this evening to ask questions tonight, ABC 7 political reporter Craig Wall and Univision Chicago news anchor Erica Maldonado. Thanks to both of you for joining us tonight as well. Now, based upon the previously drawn order, Dr. Marshall, you will be leading off answering the first question, which comes from Craig Wall.
Well, Dr. Marshall, with all the rancor in this race, all the negative ads, all the general animosity that seems to exist between Republicans and Democrats because of a lot of philosophical differences, how would you restore civility to Springfield so that the voters aren't turned off and just stay home on Election Day?
Well, thank you very much. Mike, my name is Robert Marshall. I'm a physician, and many people are seeing me for the first time. This is unfortunate. When you're an anti-establishment candidate like me, you don't get a lot of the coverage that the others do. I hope you evaluate me the same way you do the others. Now, I believe I would solve this problem of the rancor and everything because my basic philosophy is more of a middle-of-the-road philosophy. The Democratic Party has gone drastically to the left in the past year. And all of these candidates here are far on the left side. And I think my stance in the middle will help this problem of all this division and rancor.
Mr. Hardiman.
Same question.
Same question.
Yeah, first and foremost, in the introduction, I'm more than a community activist. I'm a community leader, a president of a non-for-profit organization, and I'm an adjunct professor as well. I just want to put that out there. Now, as far as the negativity, it does not bother me. 35% of the voters in Illinois are undecided. That means that all of us can be the front runner that's standing up here right now. And our plan is to go out here and make sure we help people make their minds up to vote for Teal Hardiman and Patricia Avery. We have a 2020 plan which represents a perfect vision to move the state of Illinois forward.
How do you restore civility?
You restore civility by being a positive force to be reckoned with here in Illinois. For far too long, we've had certain leaders that continue to strip the very soul out of the state of Illinois. That's why I'm running for governor, to represent everybody in this state. That's how you restore civility.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
I think it's a critical question, not just for this election, but for the future of our multicultural democracy in the United States. I'm the 8th of 11 children. I'm a middle child. I know how to get along with others. I'm a Democrat, but I'm a Kennedy Democrat, a Ted Kennedy Democrat, because Ted Kennedy was the most important man in my life growing up. He never took politics personally. He worked hard. He was one of the most progressive members of the United States Senate, but he always worked hard to have friends in the other party and throughout the entire spectrum of the Democratic Party. He worked at it day in and day out, and I think I'll do the same thing as governor of the state of Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, I've worked hard throughout this campaign to fight for the issues so important to working families, as I have done during the course of my life. My parents taught me to fight for social and economic justice, for equality and inclusion. And so you'll find in my history getting big things done, like creating 1871, which has created thousands and thousands of jobs, and helping 230,000 kids get school breakfast in low-income school districts across the state, and spending 20 years fighting for early childhood education. Those are all things that required me to bring people together around a common purpose, to provide vision and leadership, and then work together to get those things done.
Thank you, Mr. Pritzker. Mr. Diber.
Well, my candidacy has brought great hope to all of Illinois because I'm the only candidate in 20 years from downstate that has run for governor. We know that there's more that unites this state than divides us. Everyone wants a good paying job, they want a quality public school, and they want a safe neighborhood. And the integrity that a candidate brings to this race as to how they conduct themselves, as to how they present themselves on issues, restores that trust in Illinois voters. And it brings voters out from all over the state when they have a candidate that they see is part of the working class, part of the life that they live. And that's what really does it for a voter who's at their kitchen table.
Thank you, Mr. Diber. Mr. Biss.
You know, I'm proud of the time I've spent in Springfield as a state legislator, passing almost 90 bills into law, building coalitions that, frankly, a lot of people thought couldn't get built. putting together Democrats and sometimes Republicans to pass progressive priorities and change laws to change people's lives. And I plan to continue doing that work throughout the course of the general election and as governor, bringing people together in support of progressive values. And if we want people to turn out in this election, we need to give them something to turn out for. People across the state see a system that's been taken over by the wealthy, taken over by people who want to buy elections instead of earn votes. It's time for a middle-class progressive to excite the Democratic base.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. Our next question comes from Erica Maldonado, and Mr. Hardiman, you'll get the opportunity to answer first. Erica?
The Illinois House passed recently a ban on bump stocks, also licensing for dealers, and raised the minimum age to 21 years old to purchase assault weapons. If this becomes law, what else would you do to make our schools a safe place for our children?
Well, first and foremost, we have a 2020 plan which includes hiring veterans to provide extra security at the schools. Number one, I believe in placing a ban on assault weapons here and bump stocks, but I do support the Second Amendment because there's no data in the world that dictates that legal gun owners are part of the gun violence problem here in Chicago or Illinois. We have to understand that as the people here in Illinois, but also I would like to say that we have to work closely with the state police and the ATF to intercept the illegal gun trafficking here in Illinois. And as governor, I plan to set up a task force and make that a reality every step of the way. So that's my response to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardiman. Mr. Kennedy.
I'd say that gun violence, which can affect anyone in society, will eventually affect everyone. I think the notion of hardening the target, protecting the schools, that's not what we need to do, and it will never work. You can have all the police protection in the world, you can have Secret Service protection, but you can still be the victim of violence. I know that that's true in my family. I think we need to attack the stream of illegal guns that are coming into Illinois, but we also need to provide opportunity. Opportunity is the enemy of violence, and economic oppression is its partner in crime. If we give people the ability to live a full life, to enjoy being part of the American economy in the 21st century, and move away from a life of crime, a life of crimes of survival, my belief is we'll drive down violence in Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, take note that during the 3 years of Bruce Rauner's leadership of the state, that the number of violent crimes on the street has gone up substantially, particularly violence with guns. Now, of course, we need to ban assault weapons. That would go further than what the Springfield legislature has done. But I also believe you've got to fund a budget that pays for the services that people need that strengthen their communities and strengthen their families, like mental health services, which have been cut drastically under Bruce Rauner, like homeless shelters, which have been shut down, and like substance abuse treatment centers. We need to help people who have their last vestige of connection with society maintain that connection and help them so that they will avoid coming in contact with those illegal guns that are on the streets.
Thank you. Mr. Diber.
You know, our schools should not be a place where children go and their parents that they have to fear each day. And I believe we best protect children as they enter our schools if we have armed school resource officers there. Therefore, as governor, I propose that we allow schools to use health life safety funds, which they currently can't use, to pay for those SROs rather than armed teachers. I'm a regional superintendent. This is first and foremost on my mind each and every day. I also will fund maintenance grants for all of our schools to put polyvinyl on all windows and entrances. Every school should have a locked vestibule. That's how we keep kids safe. And that is the immediate action that needs to be taken as I see it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Biss.
I had the incredible honor this afternoon to meet with a group of people from a group called Purpose Over Pain, parents of people who have been slain by gun violence, who have chosen to harness the extraordinary anguish they will live with for the rest of their lives to make a difference in policy and to make a difference in others in the community. It's only a little bit by comparison with that kind of heroism, but I've been fighting in the legislature to pass bills like the ones that were passed on Wednesday, and there's much more that needs to be done, banning assault rifles for everyone and more, but we also need a governor who's going to work with our neighboring states. Listen, the border with Indiana, the border with Wisconsin, they're not impermeable. If we want to actually have safe streets in Illinois, we need Illinois to be a leader for our neighboring states and move those states in the right direction. I'm going to be the governor to do just that.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall.
Well, I have no problem with making the schools harder to get into, and I have no problem with banning bump stocks. But in this case in Florida, the government screwed up. The FBI knew about this guy, and they did nothing. Several government people knew about him, and they did nothing. And 3 guards stood outside and did nothing. The problem in this case here is that we have to correct the mistakes that the government made in Florida. We should make it so that they find these people before they do the shooting.
Thank you very much, Doug. All right, our next question comes from Craig, and Mr. Kennedy gets the first answer this time.
Mr. Kennedy, with so much focus on the Me Too movement, what specific policies, if elected, would you put in place to create real accountability for those in positions of power that would encourage more young women to get into politics and make it a safer place for the women who are already there?
That's a great question. I have 3 daughters. One of them interned in Washington, D.C. I don't think I'd encourage any of the 3 of them to intern in Springfield. They might do that on their own. They're, very independent, but that's not a place I'd want a family member, and I can tell you that. I think that I'm proud of the fact that my sister Kathleen, as Lieutenant Governor of the state of Maryland, passed the first legislation in the United States in any state to require every state employee to go through sexual harassment training, and we should do
government. We need to make sure that we're encouraging it in the private sector as well. We also need to make sure that women are empowered in the private sector and the public sector so that they reach positions of power, because I think that will do as much as anything to prevent sexual harassment. Now, in my administration and that of my running mate, State Representative Juliana Stratton, we intend to have a zero-tolerance policy and make sure that if there are any allegations, they are followed up on immediately, and that we have independent investigations, independent of the Democratic Party, independent of our administration, so that we can get to the bottom of it and hold the perpetrators responsible.
Thank you, Mr. Pritzker. Mr. Diber.
Well, I feel the environment that the governor sets in Springfield has to be welcoming. It's got to be welcoming for women. They have to be part of your administration. They have to lead by example. They have to open the door for other young women to be part of that administration and have hopes and aspirations that they become leaders of this state. And that's how it takes place. That's what I've done as elected official. I've given those opportunities to women, not just in public education, but in government. And they have done just what I've said. They have led by example. There's a trust built between an administration and those that they serve. And when that trust is broken, then you have an environment like we're talking about. I hope Chris sends his daughters to me when I'm governor, because they'll be in a good environment.
Thank you, Mr. Diber. Mr. Biss.
We need, of course, to have a zero-tolerance policy for sexual harassment, as my campaign does, as my administration will. We need universal trainings, as my campaign does, as my administration will. Zero-tolerance policy is part of why I've said that Mike Madigan should step down as chairman of the Democratic Party of Illinois, because I'm not satisfied with the response he's had to the very alarming situation that's arisen on that issue in his organization. But we need to do more than that. I'm the only candidate who's promised to have a cabinet that's majority women, because we need to lift up women in positions of power. We need to change the culture in the Capitol building in Springfield, where men talk over women, where women's voices are pushed aside, where women are silenced, where a woman has to go to a man and encourage him to claim that her idea was his before it moves forward. I've been doing that throughout my career in Springfield, and before, I'll do that as governor.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. Dr. Marshall.
Well, I've adopted the county chairman criteria. That's a very complete and set of criteria to face this problem. I'm for the ERA amendment. I think that'll help women with equality. I went to the Women's March recently, and I had a sign, and the sign was very simple. It said, "The women should be believed." If we had followed that principle 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of the problems today would not exist. The women should be believed, and we should adhere to that.
All right, thank you, Dr. Marshall. Mr. Hardiman.
Yeah, I have a background of working with women on all levels. During my time as the director of Ceasefire Illinois, I helped rescue 12 women from a prostitution ring on the west side of Chicago. I helped save the lives of 2 transgender women on the south side and the west side of Chicago. And also I used to have a recovery home, the T.O. Hardiman Recovery Home Foundation for Women, which I helped 75 women turn their lives around from drug addiction. And a lot of those women are doing real good today. Now, as far as the Hardiman Navy administration, we plan to have a policy where no harassment will be tolerated at all. 0 tolerance for sexual harassment. And we support a woman's right to choose. That's why I'm grateful to be here with the League of Women Voters here today. So that's my expertise in that area. And I'm also one of the most leading experts in violence prevention throughout the United States as well.
All right, Mr. Hardiman, thank you very much. All right, now something a little bit different. I'm going to be asking each one of you a different, specific question. There's not time, I should mention here, for the other candidates to respond to what you are saying at this time. They may have that opportunity a little bit later on. I'm going to start with Mr. Pritzker, and I'm going to ask you this question. One of the focuses that has happened in this campaign, quite frankly, is about an individual who's not in the room with us here this evening, and that's House Speaker Mike Madigan. Now, some of your opponents, as you're well aware, have been chiding you, saying that you avoid even mentioning his name. My question for you is, do you admire the work that has been done by House Speaker Mike Madigan? Do you believe that as governor you would be able to work hand in hand with Speaker Mike Madigan? Or do you, as some of the others on this panel believe, do you believe that it's time for Mike Madigan to step down?
Well, let me start by saying I'm an independent leader and have been my whole life, and that won't change when I become governor. There are things that I disagree with the Speaker about. There are things that I agree with the Speaker about. For example, I'm in favor of leadership term limits, which would limit his term. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't agree with that. And I'm in favor of independent map drawing. I'm against gerrymandering, which I'm pretty sure he doesn't agree with either. But unlike Bruce Rauner, I intend to work with whoever the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate and the legislature to get things done for working families all across the state of Illinois. And I'll stand on the principles on which I am running to get those things done. But I'm only working for one group of people, and that's the people of the state of Illinois.
And just, you have not heard enough right now in terms of any investigations that would cause you to say, I want him to step down from his post.
It took Speaker Madigan way too long to investigate, to follow up on the allegations that were made. And I think now the independent investigation that should proceed, independent of his office, independent of Speaker Madigan as Speaker, or independent of him as the leader of the Democratic Party, those need to proceed. And wherever they lead, those perpetrators need to be held accountable, including all the way to the top.
All right, thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn my attention to Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, we have now a millionaire president, we have a millionaire governor, we have a millionaire mayor in the city of Chicago. And in this race we have some candidates, some who are of considerable wealth, and that probably includes yourself. My question is this: have politics become the sport of the rich, and how can a wealthy candidate identify with those who perhaps are making $35,000 a year for a family of 4, or perhaps even someone who is rallying out on the streets asking for wages to be increased to $15 an hour?
I think it's a great question, particularly in light of where we are in the United States today. I don't believe Americans, however, believe in class warfare. I think the notion of pitting people against each other in our country really has no place. I've spent my whole life in Illinois. I moved here to join the anti-hunger movement. I, at 27, 28 years old, became chairman of the Greater Chicago Food Depository. And for the last 6 years, my wife Sheila and I have run Top Box Foods. That grounds us in the lives of people for whom this economy is not working. And it is for those people that I run for a leadership role in the state of Illinois, because I think the government can do more for everybody in our state.
All right, Mr. Kennedy, thank you. I'm going to turn now to Mr. Biss. Mr. Biss, one of your solutions to the state budget problems, and they are numerous and of course quite gigantic, but one of them is the financial transactions tax, which would be a tax, as I understand it, that would be levied at Chicago's commodities markets and the exchanges here downtown. There are some, of course, who are saying this just simply will not work, that the exchanges have the capability now, they can move to servers outside the state or whatever the case might be, or maybe even move their entire operations out of Chicago. So how do you respond to that? And if it fails, what do you do?
Well, the good news is there's a lot of things that we need to do to solve the state's budget problems, and the LaSalle Street tax is not the only one. But let me answer the direct question about the LaSalle Street tax. There are those who say it's impossible. There are those who say we shouldn't try. There are people on the stage who say it's hopeless. People on the stage who have a lot of friends who make a lot of money over there. What I would say is very simple. Our economy has transformed over the course of the last couple generations, and our tax system has not. And so what's happened is our financial sector has grown and grown and grown. The rest of the economy has shrunk, and the rest of us are being overtaxed because we haven't figured out how to tax the financial sector. Do I take those concerns seriously? Yes. Am I ready to stand with anyone and work with anyone to solve that problem in a way that works? You bet. But to say that we can't tax the financial sector is to say that we will continue overtaxing middle-class families, and that I will never accept.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Biss. Mr. Hardeman, I'm going to turn to you. Aside from running mates in the category here of those of you who are running for governor, I'm talking about you are actually the only person of color who is running in this race for governor on the Democratic side. Now, you recently told the Chicago Defender that you are, and I'm quoting now, the last great hope for my people, African-American people. My question for you is, what do you mean by that, and how would you, as governor of Illinois, be a governor for the entire state, regardless of somebody's race?
Well, I want to make this clear. I'm running for governor to support the entire state of Illinois, but we've never had a black governor in the state of Illinois. As you can see the way I'm dressed today, I'm wearing this as a symbol for everybody here in our great state. But everybody's depending on the black vote to win this governor, the primary right now. So I'm trying to appeal to all people, Hispanic people, white people, African-American people. I'm the only candidate up here. I ran for governor in 2014 and secured 30% of the state vote, winning 30 counties downstate. I'm really the governor for the poor people and the middle class and the working class people, so my campaign is all inclusive. That's what I meant. I'm the last hope for my people because we've never had a black governor, and I'm running to make history here in Illinois as well.
Are you finding support? Do you feel you have the support?
Well, we have support. A lot of people talk about the support issue. We have staff down in southern Illinois. We have staff in central Illinois, Lake County, all through Cook County, and I plan to surprise everybody. The polls had me at 5% in 2014, and we finished with 28.1% of the state vote. I believe everybody watching today, the 35% of the undecided voters, hopefully I'll give them a reason to make up their mind tonight.
Thank you.
That's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Mr. Hardeman. I'm going to turn now to Mr. Diber. Mr. Diber, why do you support, as part of your proposal, I understand, and again, we're talking about tackling the state's budget situation in this case, why do you support taxing retirement income? Because is that not essentially forcing the people who've managed to save on their own, or perhaps through 401ks or their own retirement savings, is it not penalizing them for perhaps the bad decisions that were made in Springfield all these years?
Well, let me clarify that. I laid out a progressive tax model, and everyone but Mr. Marshall is in favor of progressive tax. So in states that have progressive tax models, you must have a base that you begin that progressive tax at, which I've laid out as $25,000. And I've said this, that as an option to pay down the debt interest on the pension bonds, I would ask those who are part of a state pension system to participate at 1%. I think it's been misinterpreted that I would tax all of retirement income. I've never said that.
Thanks for clarifying that point. I appreciate that. Mr. Marshall, I'm going to turn to you. And as Mr. Diber has just mentioned, among the candidates, you are the only person, I believe, among this panel anyway, that is not in favor of a progressive, or some people might call it a graduated income tax in the state of Illinois. But what I do want to ask you about is, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you have been calling for tolls perhaps to be placed on major highways right along the Illinois state lines, so that those who are not from Illinois would actually pay a toll as they came into the state. My question for you, does that not tell the transportation, the shipping industries, or for that matter even tourism, go around Illinois, don't come through?
Well, that'll be very difficult to do. First of all, you mentioned Mr. Madigan. Mr. Madigan has ruined this state. We are $120 billion unfunded pensions, lousy credit rating, $16 billion unpaid bills. He did that, and Mr. Madigan has ruined his state. I have a plan that would solve that problem. Now, about my basic strategy is to find new sources of income instead of hitting the property tax owner over and over again.
But do you see people really paying a toll to get into the state of Illinois?
Right now, they go through the whole state and not pay a penny. They can go through our whole entire state and tear up our roads, pollute our air, and not pay a penny.
Except for Illinois tollways, which of course they pay for.
No, but there's 15 entrances to the state, and we could put tolls there, and it would pay for the whole system.
All right, thank you, Dr. Marshall. Thank you very much. All right, I want to get back to the general questions now, and Mr. Pritzker, you're going to have the opportunity first to answer the question that's coming from Erica.
Well, Illinois in recent years have lost population and also businesses. What is your plan to attract jobs, encourage businesses to return to Illinois? And actually, what do you think should be the role of unions in this process?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm the only candidate on the stage that's created thousands and thousands of jobs. I founded 1871, which is a nonprofit small business incubator in Chicago that's created 7,000 jobs and hundreds of companies. And thousands of jobs that I've created in my own business. But one thing I know is that 2/3 of all the jobs that get created in the state are created by small businesses. So you need a governor who's going to help small businesses grow, and I put out a plan to help that. I also believe we've got to invest in our infrastructure in the state. We are the supply chain hub of the nation. We've got to make sure our roads and bridges and waterways are the best. And we've got to invest in higher education, expand our opportunities to market our agricultural products and manufacturing. You need a governor who's going to actually market the state for what it is, the best educated, most dedicated workforce in the nation. We can work with our labor unions to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Pritzker. Mr. Diber.
Sure. I haven't created maybe thousands of jobs, but I've created thousands of workers as a career and technical director, and all those young people have went on to seek good-paying jobs. And it's with a well-trained workforce that you attract business. There's three things: well-trained workforce, supportive infrastructure, and expediation and permitting. And I will tell you that if this state is going to prosper, we have to do something very important. We have to say no to right to work in the state of Illinois. We have to rise above our neighbors. We have to lead by example, that in Illinois you can go to work, have benefits, make a good wage to take home to your family, and be safe at the end of the day. That's what Bob Diber stands for, and that's how I will grow the Illinois economy.
Thank you, Mr. Diber. Mr. Biss.
You know, it's incredible to me that in the era of Trump and Rauner, here in the Democratic primary for governor of Illinois, we have two guys in this primary, J.B. Pritzker and Chris Kennedy, who are going to tell us that because of their experience as wealthy businessmen, they know how to create jobs for the state of Illinois. Let's not make that mistake again. We need someone who understands what ordinary people need. We need someone who's going to level the playing field in a tax system that not only pushes middle-class families out of Illinois, but also makes it harder for small businesses because we have a tax system written by big corporations for big corporations. We need to level the playing field when it comes to regulations. And most importantly, we need to invest in the public goods, education, and infrastructure that are needed to build a vibrant, high-wage economy in a modern society.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. Dr. Marshall.
Well, for jobs, we have to stop taxing people. Stop taxing the people of Illinois. We've got to. I'm opposed to the income taxes, graduated income tax, and all the other tax increases. We have to encourage people to stay here by not taxing them to death. And then we should create new jobs. Legalize marijuana. That'll create 30,000 to 40,000 new jobs throughout this entire state, growing it, shipping it, selling it. And the other source of jobs is casino gambling for Chicago. That'll create tens of thousands of jobs.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Mr. Hardiman.
Yeah, also, I'd like to just add, when I say I'm the last hope for my people, I'd like to say this because everybody wants the black vote. This is about jobs, too. But right now, the unemployment rate is 14.2% for African-American people statewide, the highest in the nation. 43% unemployment for African-American young men between the ages of 20 and 24 here in Chicago, Peoria, East St. Louis, and Decatur. I'm running to create jobs, and the way we're going to create the jobs, I support House Bill 453, which is the financial transaction tax. That tax is projected to bring in about $3 billion of new revenue. We legalize small amounts of recreational marijuana, and that tax money can be anywhere from $1 billion to $2 billion. That's $5 billion of new revenue that we can use for apprenticeship programs for all people. I'm talking everybody. We have 1.7 million people living in poverty throughout the state of Illinois right now, and that's all people. But we're going to create jobs with a new revenue source.
Thank you, Mr. Hardiman. Mr. Kennedy.
So there's only one thing that's ever worked well in multiple cities and multiple decades in the United States to create job creation and an expanding economy, and it's the power of education. When I graduated from high school, when I graduated from college back in the 1980s, my friends and I, we moved to where the jobs were. That's not the way the American economy works anymore. Today, the jobs move to where the highly educated young people are. Capital follows talent. If we give the world highly educated young people, the world will give us its jobs. It's not that hard to do, to invest in education, and we're not doing it in Illinois because the leadership here, particularly the leadership of the Democratic Party, have outside jobs as property tax appeals lawyers. They're making money on a property tax system, preventing us from migrating to a graduated income tax.
Mr. Kennedy, thank you very much. Our next question coming from Craig, and actually Mr. Diber gets the first chance to answer this one, Craig.
Mr. Diber, the state is facing financial problems with nearly $9 billion in unpaid bills, proposals for shifting the pension costs, which are going to raise property taxes. There's cuts to social services that are concerns out there. What would be your solution to the budget mess without simply raising taxes?
I've said this from day one when I announced my candidacy, that within 90 days of being governor, I would ask for a bond bill. I would do what's right, and that's pay the state's bills. I would bond those bills. I would look at reinvesting our debt, lowering our interest. Last year, we wasted over $1 billion of taxpayers' money on interest payments, up to 12%. We can do much better than that. We can take that $1 billion, reinvest in higher education, reinvest in our school systems, and put the state of Illinois going in the right direction. Until we pay our bills, can we be first in anything in the state? And then I will present a manageable budget that brings back social services for people who are asking for them, to better fund our schools, and pass a progressive tax that will bring the revenue in my administration to fund the state of Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Diber. Mr. Biss?
Besides fixing our tax system, which I do think has to be job number one, there are other important ways that we can balance the budget. First of all, if we actually have a sustainable budget and a sane government, we will start to see people come to Illinois and invest in Illinois and begin to grow our economy. But next, when people ask about how to balance the budget using the spending side, they're usually talking about how to cut programs, which is a mistake in an environment where we already are underfunding education and healthcare and human services. What we need to do instead is root out the places where the corrupt structure of Illinois government has created silos and fiefdoms inside our government, and resulting in a situation where instead of having an integrated and efficient government, there's little pots of money controlled by people with political interests and greed instead of acting in the public interest.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Marshall.
All right, well, fasten your safety belts here. What we need to do is find some way to renegotiate all of these debts and pensions. Now, states cannot declare bankruptcy, but I have proposed a bold plan that's mine and no one else's. That's to dissolve the state of Illinois and divide it up into 3 brand new states. These states will be Chicago, the suburbs north of Route 80, and everything south of Route 80. The beauty of it is that everything is dissolved and everything is started all over with brand new states. And each state can renegotiate the pensions, the debts, the unpaid bills, and they can start all over with a new economic outlook.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Mr. Hardiman.
Yeah, the Hardiman and Avery administration, what we would do is push forth the progressive tax, which is projected to bring in about $3 billion of new revenue, along with legalizing small amounts of recreational uses, marijuana, which can bring in from $1 to $3 billion. And then also the financial transaction tax, which is projected, like I said previously, to bring in about $3 billion. Combined, that's about, say, $9 billion. We would use those new funds to help balance the state budget and pay down some of our bills and move forward, because right now we're spending $25 million a day on a pension, $9 billion a year. That's another crisis that we have to face here in Illinois, but that's the way we would actually pay down the debts here in the state of Illinois.
Mr. Hardiman, thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
I don't think that we can cut our way to a balanced budget, and I don't think we can tax our way to a balanced budget. I think we can eliminate levels of government. I think we can eliminate specific constitutional offices and save a lot of money. In terms of taxes, I think there are ways to tax our economy without destroying it. I think we need a graduated progressive income tax that involves opening up the state constitution over the long term. And in the short term, we ought to adopt the Massachusetts model of a synthetic progressive income tax. I think we should tax people who live in other states but work in Illinois, because I don't think we should allow tax cheats. I think we need to close the loophole that allows people to buy off the internet and not pay sales tax in Illinois. And I think the state should file undervaluation complaints against the largest properties that are undervalued.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, you know, there are really 3 components that make up a balanced budget. People talk about expenditures and revenues, but there's also growth. if we can create jobs, if we can attract businesses to the state of Illinois, we can bring revenue to the state without raising taxes. Now, I happen to think we also need a progressive income tax in the state so that the wealthy pay more and the people who are in the middle class and striving to get there pay less, and we're able to lower our local property tax burden. But, you know, one of the points of difference between Chris Kennedy and me in this race is I'm in favor of legalizing marijuana and taxing it. I think we can do it right away in a new administration. We don't need any more studies. We can make that happen, and we can create jobs and be intentional about allowing people who have been burdened by the war on drugs to be part of the licensure and have dispensaries and production facilities.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, our next question coming from Erica. Mr. Biss getting the first chance to respond this time, Erica.
Our coming primaries have a record number of Latino on the ballots, but none of you have chose a running mate from this community. What is your strategy to include the voice of Latinos in your administration, and what are the names of specific people that you're going to surround your administration with, or organizations that you're currently working with?
Thank you for the question. I've been proud to have endorsements from Latino leaders like Alderman Roberto Maldonado and Senator Omar Aquino, who have been absolutely focal points of our campaign and our strategy, and to spend significant amounts of time in the Latino community because of the partnership I've had with the community over the course of a number of years, working closely, for example, with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights on a series of battles, fighting for years to pass the Trust Act, which we finally were able to enact into law this past summer, taking that first step to have Illinois be a welcoming state for immigrants. But there's so much work left to be done, strengthening this Trust Act, working on stronger municipal ordinances. There will not be a governor who is a closer friend of the Latino community than I, and I look forward to carrying on that work.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. Dr. Marshall.
Well, I apologize. I really don't know that many, and I don't have any on my staff. If I'm elected, I will try to do my best I can to appoint Hispanics. My plan, by the way, speaking of Hispanic people, my plan of dividing the state up and making Chicago its own state will help minorities greatly because they will form such a large percentage of the population. African Americans will be 25% of this new state. Hispanics will be 23%. That's an enormous amount of power, and you can use that power to solve your problems.
All right. Mr. Hardiman?
Yeah, my initial choice for my running mate, his name is Charlie Farrell. He's a Mexican-American young man, but he decided not to run. And then Patricia Aves, she's my running mate right now. But for those who do not know, I've done an extensive amount of work in the Latino-American community. I've worked in Little Village, Pilsen, the back of the yards, Humboldt Park, Logan Square, Waukegan, all across the board. We have Latino staff working for us right now, and what I plan to do is make sure we have a very diverse administration. There are a lot of issues that the Latino community is faced with, and I plan to fix some of those conditions as well. I'm African American, but my name is Tio. It means uncle in Spanish, so I'm the uncle of all Latino people here in Illinois as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. I won't say Uncle Hardiman. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We'll move on to Mr.
love
Kennedy.
that question. When I first came to Chicago, I was welcomed by the folks at El Valor and volunteered there for about a decade. I'd look to people like Ray Gonzalez, who's there to help guide me as I build out an administration that looks like the state itself. I'd look to people like Rick Estrada, Metropolitan Family Services, who I served with on the board of the University of Illinois. People like Chuy Garcia, who I hope will be our newest congressman from the city of Chicago. And I'm delighted today to have in the audience Dolores Huerta, one of the great civil rights leaders who helped pioneer the use of boycotts as an economic tool to make sure that our labor laws in the United States reflect the values that we want everywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, we have terrific organizations all across the state of Illinois representing the Latino and Latina community. I am so proud to have the endorsement in this race of Congressman Luis Gutierrez and of Alderman Gil Villegas and Alderman Danny Solis and Alderman George Cardenas and our comptroller, Susana Mendoza. We have talent in our organizations like Resurrection Project and the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. I am very proud to have put forward a plan for job creation in the Latino community and for protecting immigrant rights. So incredibly important that this state remain a welcoming state for immigrants and that we stand up against Donald Trump and his attempts to take away our DACA recipients' certification.
Thank you, Mr. Pritzker. Mr. Diber.
Yes, I said from day one that my administration would reflect multiracial, multigender, and that I was very open to Latinos being part of my administration. I interviewed some when I was seeking a lieutenant governor, was not successful in getting a running mate. But today, I think that there's an understanding amongst Latinos in Chicago. I joined Alderman Ray Lopez for the groundbreaking today of a community health center, and he was very welcoming, and I think that they know that I'm an individual that has great interest in their community, and I'd be very receptive to them being part of my administration.
All right, thank you very much. Gentlemen, now is the time I'm going to ask each one of you to clarify, or perhaps even to expand upon something that you've already said earlier in this debate. I want to focus on the state budget situation, since it is so critical and affects all the services and, of course, what people are paying out of their pockets as well. Mr. Kennedy, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned the out-of-state tax. Some people might refer to it as the Florida tax. I think they're referring to Chicagoans or Illinoisans who spend an awful lot of time in Florida, but and as a result, don't attempt to pay taxes here in Illinois, or explain that to me.
So if LeBron James plays in LA, he pays taxes in California, income tax the day he plays. When he goes to New York, he pays income tax in New York. When I worked for a publicly traded company, when I'd go to New York, I paid taxes in New York that day. When I went to LA, I paid income tax in California that day. Our state doesn't have that tax. That allows people who claim that they live in Florida, and you don't have to move there for very much time, to continue to have jobs in Illinois, to earn income here, and not pay their fair share of the income tax.
So you're not necessarily referring to Illinois residents who spend a good deal of time in Florida but gain some income from Illinois?
People who pretend that they live in another state and continue to earn income here.
All right. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Mr. Biss, I want to then turn to you now. And again, we're talking about the budget situation. I know you said that the efforts you see do not involve necessarily cutting programs to a great degree, but there are many people who might say we have to cut somewhere. We can't find the revenue that we need to bring this state back into a solvency situation. What would you say to that?
I would say that the way to cut is not to look at the spreadsheet of the budget and reduce a number and pretend you've solved a problem when in fact you've just shifted a cost somewhere else, when in fact you've closed down a mental health facility somewhere and created more problems for somewhere else. The way to cut the budget is to fix the way the government is run. We have a system in Illinois where the government is full of little pockets that are isolated from the rest of the government. Those pockets will be controlled by a particular person, perhaps for their financial benefit, perhaps for their political benefit, and that's why our government often feels inefficient to people. If we want to cut the budget in a responsible and humane way, the way to do it is to fix the way the government is structured, not to go after services that people in Illinois badly need and rely upon.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. I'm going to turn to Mr. Pritzker now. As we've kind of established here, but maybe people don't know, in order to accomplish a progressive or graduated tax in the state of Illinois, you need a constitutional amendment to do it. It's not an easy process. We've seen attempts to do this on other matters as well. So how would you accomplish this? In what period of time could you accomplish it? Who are you going to turn to rally the people to get behind this?
Well, as you note, I am actually running with a progressive income tax as an important part of my platform. I think that's critical if we're going to get a constitutional amendment. And we need to pass a progressive income tax because it'll help us pay for our schools. It'll help us lower local property taxes, which are so unfair to the middle class and those striving to get to the middle class. They pay the highest rates of local property taxes. In order to get it done, we need to not only run on it, but also make sure that we're helping others get elected who believe in a progressive income tax up and down the ticket. We need state reps and state senators to vote for it. And in the 2 years that it'll take to get done, we can have an artificial implementation of a progressive income tax by, it's really a Massachusetts model. It's the idea is raise the exemptions for the middle class, and you can raise the overall rate and thereby get an artificial.
I need to stop you on that, but I understand. I think we understand the exemption. But thank you for going into the explanation. I'm going to turn to Mr. Hardiman now, and I know the progressive tax is part of your platform as well. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but it includes, depending upon the income level, and maybe these are higher income people, up to a 10% tax on income. Is that correct?
Exactly. For far too long, the wealthy people in the state of Illinois have been getting away without paying their fair share of taxes. So what we propose is a 1 to 10% graduated scale. If you're making $35,000 or less, you pay 1 to 2% taxes. If you're making $100,000 to maybe $250,000 you jump to 3 to 4%. If you like at a range where you're 250 to maybe 750,000, you should be paying like 5 to 7%. And if you're making $1 million to a few $1 billion, you pay 8 to 10% taxes. That way we can raise a much needed $3 billion of new revenue here in the state of Illinois that can really work to help boost the economy.
You think you can sell people on a 10% tax, even at incomes of $1 million or more?
Well, it's all about, this is the thing, it's all about the will of the people. It's about the will of the people. As governor, I have a history of organizing people, so what I would do is just really push and organize around this issue of the progressive tax and make it a reality by organizing millions of people here in the state to make that happen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Diber, I'm going to turn to you. I know you mentioned as part of your plan would be to refinance this debt and perhaps re-amortize it out over a longer period of time. I'm not sure exactly if that's the plan fully. Obviously, you have an education background. You're concerned about funding for education. Bring it all around and bring it into focus as to how this would work.
Well, here's what I've said, that over a period of time, let's say we had no tax increase, with the increase from 3.75 to 4.95%, we have gained and will gain near $2 billion of revenue, as was exercised when the tax increase happened from 2010 to 14. So we know that the revenue growth is going to be there. And what I have said is this, is that if we amortize the debt over a period of time, I believe in 4 years, I can pay the interest and pay the principal to pay off the $9 billion of unpaid bills.
In 4 years, you think you can accomplish that?
I sure can.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. And let's see. Did I miss somebody along the way? Oh, Dr. Marshall, forgive me. And you told us to put our seatbelts on, so I want to make sure I've got mine on right now. We're talking about dividing up the state of Illinois, dissolving the current state, and creating 3 separate states. I know you've said that it would be basically the city of Chicago, and then Chicago suburbs, and then the rest of downstate. Okay, let's start first of all with the mountain of debt that we're facing and how on earth that would be divided up between those 3 entities as to whether it be per capita or whether it's just land mass, or how would you do this?
Well, first of all, a pox on all your houses. I'm against it. The progressive income tax is a ripoff. It's a tax on people who are doing well. And where do these people live? They live in the suburbs. So to me, a progressive income tax is a tax on the suburban people, plus your upper class people in Chicago. Now, for dividing up the wealth, it could be done on the basis of family income. You could calculate the total family income for Chicago. If they make up 33% of family income throughout the state, they would get 33% of the bills, the debts, and pensions, or whatever. You could do it like that.
All right, Dr. Marshall, thank you. I'm going to move on to what I have is a short final question for each one of you. It is the same question for each of you, so not different questions now. But this final question, and actually, Dr. Marshall, I'm going to start with you. And here it is. As you know, Amazon is considering possibly moving its second headquarters here to the state of Illinois. Chicago seems to be in contention. Pretend right now, Jeff Bezos is in this room. He's walked in right now, all right? Do you attempt to sell him on moving that second headquarters and planting it in Illinois? If you do, say so. If you don't, say so. And tell me why in each case. Go right ahead.
2 reasons, Mr. Bezos. 2 things. I will not screw your employees with a progressive income tax, because he has very many high-paid employees. So progressive income tax is really going to hit his employees. Number 2, the money from the marijuana should be rebated to property owners. So, Mr. Bezos, that big new building you bought, we're going to give you a tax rebate directly from the marijuana money.
So you would encourage him, though, to bring it to whatever state it is at that particular time.
Oh, sure. I mean, but the thing is, if he might bring 50,000 jobs, but we might have to pay $2 billion. If you legalize marijuana, you'd create the same thing and not have to pay a penny.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Mr. Hardiman.
Well, unlike Governor Rauner, who stated that he would like to see Amazon move to St. Louis, Missouri, so they can boost the economy in southern Illinois, there's no reason in the world why a sitting governor would make that statement. I would definitely encourage Amazon to move to East St. Louis, Decatur, or the south side of Chicago, move to Cicero, help some people out. Amazon can bring 50,000 new jobs to the state of Illinois. So as your governor, you have a governor talking to you right now that does not have to drink no chocolate milk to show our support diversity. That's what Governor Rauner did. So we need to really think out of the box right now. I'm running for governor, so if you want something different, you have to do something different. But Amazon should be here in Illinois. We need the jobs, and as your governor, I plan to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
If Jeff Bezos walked in this room tonight, I'd ask him to explain what Dr. Marshall said when he said a pox on all your houses. I'm still trying to figure out what that phrase means.
For your graduated income tax.
Okay. I'd say that In truth, if he walked in, I'd ask him why he hasn't matched the restrictions that Dick's has done on gun sales at Amazon, which I think Jeff Bezos should do, and he should do this week.
Would you make a contingent on that?
What's that?
You'd make a contingent on that? Your offer to come to Illinois would be contingent on that move?
I'd have that hard conversation with him, absolutely. I think in terms of what we should offer any company moving to Illinois, I wouldn't give the sweetheart deals that Daniel Biss has voted for groups like Sears or the Mercantile Exchange. I'd have a but-for test. But for the fact that they're here, we wouldn't have this income, and that income, therefore, is available as an incentive for a corporation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, we need to attract jobs to the state of Illinois, and we've got a very attractive feature here, and that's our workforce. We have the most educated, dedicated workforce in the nation. Now, we need to invest in that workforce, and under Bruce Rauner, we haven't, and we've driven 72,000 students out of Illinois. And those are our best economic resources for the future. Now, what would I say to Jeff Bezos? We have the talent that you need for your business. That's why you should come here. And should we offer incentives? Look, it is unfortunate that we live in a world where municipalities and states are competing against one another. But we need to offer incentives, and then the return on investment for the state of Illinois should be spread throughout the state, not just to the one location where that business moves to.
Thank you. Mr. Diber.
Mr. Bezos walked in the room tonight. I'd say it's good to see you, sir. Let's go to Madison County, where you've got the largest Midwest distribution warehouse. Let's look at how much profit you've made by moving to Illinois, and let's expand your profit margin by building even a bigger distribution center in the state of Illinois. Let's bring more jobs from Amazon to employ more people that are coders, that are assemblers, and let's bring another trucking firm that we need to distribute your products even more in Illinois. And we're just going to continue to grow this as a state.
Mr. Biss, are you in favor of wooing Amazon to come here?
I think we ought to ask ourselves what kind of economy we have and what kind of economy we want. Here's one of the problems right now. We have so much concentration of wealth at the top in the economy represented by J.B. Pritzker and Chris Kennedy, where a few people have more and more and more, and the rest of us have less and less. And that is being replicated in the corporate sector as well. Now, we need to be very careful. Do I want 50,000 jobs? You bet. Is there a positive economic benefit associated with Amazon coming? For sure. But we cannot get involved in chasing them in a way that would increase the concentration of wealth and make it harder and harder for small businesses and entrepreneurs to compete and create the thriving economy Illinois really needs.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. Now, each of you get, I need to tell you, you each get 1 minute now. These are your closing statements, so I do need to move on, forgive me. But according to our pre-debate draw, we're going to be starting with Mr. Hardiman. Mr. Hardiman, your closing statement.
Well, once again, T.U. Hardiman, I'm running for governor for the second time. I ran in 2014, secured close to 30% of the state vote, winning 30 counties downstate. Our 2020 plan includes the veterans, seniors, college students, people with disabilities, the LGBT community, child care service providers, ex-offenders, veterans, the homeless population, the recovering community, women, children, and we support DACA. And I would like to encourage everybody to think out of the box. If you want something different, we must do something different. The way everybody flocked to the theaters to go see the Black Panther movie, I want you to flock to the polls to vote for T.U. Hardiman and Patricia Avery. I'm not saying this just because I'm African American. I'm saying this because we're qualified to lead this state. And if you look at the fact, we've never had a minority governor here in the state of Illinois. And when I said I represent the last hope, the great hope for African American people, I meant to say that I represent the last great hope for everybody here in Illinois, because we have 1.7 million people living in poverty, and we need to change those numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Hardiman. Dr. Marshall, you are next.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Well, if you're happy with the establishment, if you're happy with the way things are, the debts, $120 billion of unpaid pensions, if you're happy with that, don't vote for me. There's 3 people at least on the left side of the stage here who are just like that with Mr. Madigan, and I'm not like that at all. So I'm an anti-establishment candidate. I have new ideas. My basic philosophy is to find new sources of income, and we've mentioned 3 of them here, and to stop hitting the taxpayer up for taxes. I am against all state tax increases. Income, gasoline, tobacco, sales, etc., etc. I'm against all of it. That's how you encourage people to stay here and encourage businesses to come back.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marshall. Mr. Pritzker.
Thank you.
Well, I'm running for governor because everything we care about is under siege by a racist, misogynist president in Washington, D.C., and by his local silent partner, Governor Bruce Rauner. Now, my parents taught me to fight for social and economic justice, equality, and inclusion. And so I've tried to do big things for families all across the state of Illinois, expanding school breakfast programs, preschool and child care for kids who otherwise weren't getting it, creating thousands and thousands of jobs, running the Illinois Human Rights Commission so people could get justice when they've been discriminated against. We need to get big things done in this state. Quality education for every child, universal health care. We need to create jobs. I'm J.B. Pritzker. I'm going to beat Bruce Rauner, and I'm going to put Springfield back on the side of working families.
Thank you, Mr. Pritzker. Mr. Kennedy.
I think as Democrats, the thing that separates us from Republicans is this notion that we believe that government can be the people's ally, that government can educate our children, keep our communities safe, take care of our elderly parents, give them the retirement and health care that they deserve. But nobody's ever going to trust us and believe in that. Not other Democrats, not independents, not progressive Republicans, if they believe that our government is designed to enrich a handful of elected officials at the cost of everybody else in our state. And unfortunately, that's what's going on now. The chairman of the Democratic Party, the Speaker of the House, has the largest market share of property tax business anywhere in the state. In that role, as chairman of the party, he helped choose the head of the party in Cook County, who chose himself as the Cook County assessor. Now, the head of the party appeals taxes to the Cook County assessor who he installed in that job. That needs to end.
Thank you very much. Mr. Biss.
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot during the course of the last 24 hours about the price of a monthly CTA pass. And I learned something you might find kind of interesting. I learned that when J.B. Pritzker's campaign spends $171,000 a day to try to buy this nomination, they're buying slightly over 1,600 monthly CTA passes. And I thought that was an interesting little example of what's at stake in this election. We have a profound choice as Democrats about what kind of party we're going to be. Are we going to be a billionaire party, or are we going to be a people's party? Are we going to say that in an era of Trump and Rauner, we want to do that too? Are we going to assume that money is what it takes to win elections now, or are we going to build a different kind of movement? I'm running for governor because it's time to change what's possible in Illinois. I'm running for governor because we have seen incredible potential in this state cast aside by a political system that sets its sight too low. I'm Daniel Biss, and I'm running for governor because in 2008, it's time to get it right.
Thank you very much. Mr. Diber.
Thank you. Well, there's been a lot said over the course of this campaign by different individuals about people who are in other offices and about each other. But I think when it boils down to this, I think the voters are looking at someone who's got government experience, that can govern, like myself, 20 years of serving in government. And that's the type of person that's going to go to Springfield and get things done. You know, last night I was asked how much a jar of peanut butter was, and I said $2.65. I also know how to eat a hot dog on a slice of bread because I'm an everyday guy. And that's the life I've lived with people in my part of the state. And you know, if you want a governor that's going to change the way things are, as people talk about in the state, you've got to elect someone else. And I am the individual. Thank you.
And thank you, because that wraps up this debate for the Democratic nomination in the Illinois governor's race. Our thanks truly to all six of you, all six candidates who have joined us this evening, and also to Craig Wall and Erica Maldonado. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm Alan Kraszewski. Thank you for joining us tonight. Don't forget to vote. Have a great night.